Today, I'm going to talk about surprisingly unreliable cars. Cars from brands that we generally relate to reliability, like Toyota, like Mazda, and dare I even say it, Honda as well. Now, each of the cars that I'm going to name in this video have got a really strong possibility of causing you some major headaches, so for that reason, I'd avoid them like the plague. The first one, it breaks my heart a little bit as a huge Honda fan, but we need to talk about it. It's the 1 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder that you're going to find in Civics from 2017 onwards. Now, the big problem with this engine is it uses a wet belt, so it's just like Peugeot's PureTech engines and the Ford EcoBoost engines. It's really disappointing that Honda decided to fit one of these, given that they generally make some of the most reliable cars on the road, but they did. Strangely, you'll find a wealth of information about both the PureTech and the EcoBoost engines, but barely anyone is talking about this Honda unit, which is why I wanted to include it. As is often the case on a wet belt engine, the rubber timing belt, which is submerged in the hot oil, starts to break apart and these little rubber particles clog up various parts of the engine. We can tell it's bits of belt when we strip it down because we run a magnet across it and the magnet doesn't pick it up. That's a telltale sign that that belt is breaking up, and that's what we're finding in the oil. Usually, the first casualty of this is the turbo will fail. Once that occurs, that belt's going to need to be changed, the turbo's going to need to be swapped out, and you're going to need to find a garage who are experienced in working with wet belts to do this. It's a massive job. It involves dismantling quite a bit of the engine, and the worst part is, once it's replaced, there's nothing stopping the whole cycle from repeating itself once again. So sadly, my best advice here is just avoid this Honda engine. Can't believe I'm saying that. Next is one of the most common cars on our roads, the second generation Ford Kuga. Introduced in 2012, they made these up until 2020, and some of these could be massively problematic. Specifically, I'm talking here about the cars made between 2012 and the facelift, which occurred in 2016. These had an early version of the PowerShift automatic gearbox, and it was truly dreadful. It had these plastic retainer clips which would fatigue inside the gearbox and break off, given that they were plastic after all. That would leave the car stranded without drive, and then what would happen is we'd need to pull the gearbox out of the car, pull it apart, retrieve all of the bits inside, which would often make a real mess inside the gearbox, find their way throughout the gearbox, replace all the broken parts and put it back in for the same thing to potentially happen again. Now, Ford realised this, and in 2016, at the facelift, they completely changed the design. So if your heart is set on an auto Kuga, make sure it's a post-2016 facelift. As a side note, if you do go view one of these, or any car for that matter, I'd really suggest taking one of these along with you. This is Carly, a little gadget that works on just about any car made after 2001. It plugs right into the OBD port, and it allows you to run manufacturer level diagnostic scans on that car in just a couple of minutes in most cases. Let me show you quickly on my latest purchase. When I went to view this 2015 Volkswagen Golf R, which I ended up buying, I still plugged my Carly in, even though there was no lights shown on the dash. The reason for that is Carly lets us check for any stored codes that the car might have on its many computers. You certainly don't need to be a mechanic to use it. You just plug it in, hit connect, and as you can see, it starts connecting to the car right away. So once that completes, we've then got a full report of every code, every problem that this car has ever stored. How priceless is that when you're buying a used car? Let me show you in Central Electronics, because I did actually use this to solve an issue I had with this car last night. So I had my dog in the boot, funnily enough, just for a short journey. When I got to my destination, the boot would not open. It just would not open. So I plugged this in, and I could see here, so it was telling me that the rear adjuster, there was a short circuit on it. Now, from that, I determined it's likely going to be the fuse, isn't it? And sure enough, when I checked the fuse for the boot release had blown. So thanks, Carly, for that one. The other problem I've got here, radio key 2 below lower limit value. I suspect that's probably just the key battery, but to be sure, I can make use of their smart mechanic, which will basically give me a step-by-step process as to how I can look to resolve this issue. And they've got a massive database, 10,000 plus problems. Now, the other thing you can do with Carly, which is a bit more exciting, is coding. So essentially use Carly to unlock hidden features of your car. This works especially well on Volkswagen, Audi, BMW, but it works on others as well. Once complete, we can access each of the car's ECUs and make changes to them. So I'm going to go for the top one here and see what we've got. Here's some of the changes that I've made to this car in particular. So audible confirmation when unlocking, so it beeps. I'm going to turn that on. I like having that. What else we got? Folding mirrors, so when I lock the car using the key fob, I want the mirrors to fold in. It's sometimes parked on a busy road, so that's ideal. And there's loads of stuff you can change here, even getting into the nitty gritty things like seat heating temperature for the driver when it's on stage 3. I do like a toasty seat, so I'm going to turn that all the way up. I'll finish off by coding that in. Done. Look, if you'd like to get one of these for yourself, and even better, save a bit of money in the process, make use of my discount code, which is just SCC15. Honestly, I wouldn't be recommending these if they weren't good. I never go buy a used car without taking mine with me and having a quick look. In the olden days, we used to do inspections and adjustments with a set of spanners, didn't we? Nowadays, this is how it's done. Right, let's get back to our video. Welcome back. I can't quite believe I'm going to say this, but the next car on the list to talk about, it's another Honda. Specifically, it's an engine. It's the newer 1.5 that you're going to find in the likes of CR-Vs and Civics. Now, let me be clear here from the outset, I'm not definitively saying avoid these engines at all costs, like I would with the 1 litre wet belt from Honda. But there are a few things you maybe want to be aware of before you commit to a purchase on this engine. So it's used all over the world. In the USA, there's been class action lawsuits against Honda over fuel dilution issues on this particular engine. Similar is seen in China as well. Now, fuel dilution, this is when the fuel finds its way into the engine oil, diluting it down, and that can cause no end of problems if it's left in there. Now, every car does it to some extent, but these 1.5s, they are especially bad for it. When we analyse oil, anything under 2% of fuel in there is considered pretty acceptable. These often have quite a bit more than that. Now, Honda claim there's no issue with the engines in the UK or Europe, and therefore no action is being taken, even though they're recalling millions of them elsewhere. Now, we've seen similar to this with Ford recalling thousands of EcoBoost engines in the USA, but not taking those same steps here. You do wonder how much the litigious processes which are commonplace in the USA play into these things. We just don't have the same level here in the UK. The worrying thing is, if you have a bit of a hunt around the forums, you speak to a few owners, there are now a couple that are noticing their oil level rising, suggesting that some of the engines here may well have these same issues. Honda blamed operating in cold temperatures and short journeys for this issue occurring and suggested that the UK just simply does not get cold enough for it to occur. Maybe, just maybe, these known UK and European cases are red herrings, one-offs, but I would urge a bit of caution on these 1.5s until we start to determine whether or not it is an issue. They're still new enough that we don't commonly hear about widespread problems, but as the years roll on, who's to say? All I can do is make you aware. The final car to make this list is from the last brand you would expect right after Honda. It's Toyota. Specifically here, this is more of a bargain purchase, but people out there are still buying them, and worryingly, I see them recommended all the time. It's the 2012 Mark III RAV4. Well, it ran up to 2012. Now, I felt this was an important one to include, as it is often hailed as one of the most reliable cars you can buy. Whilst that may be the case with certain petrol-powered ones, it's certainly not the case with the diesels. It's the diesels that are the problem. These can have issues with the oil pump, which can fail and end up costing you the engine. They can also have head gasket problems, which is expensive, even if you manage to catch it in time before the car starts overheating. In general, especially for this era of Toyota, you should just stick to petrol. Some of them are absolutely bomb-proof, but their diesels, they just weren't great, and that includes cars like the Yaris and the Avensis as well. Cars that you would just expect better from, thanks to their petrol counterparts. They're a bit like Mazda in that respect, with their Skyactiv diesels. These were absolutely terrible, whilst the petrol equivalents, well, they're some of the most reliable engines you can buy. It's all a bit strange, isn't it? Well, there you have it. A handful of cars that you might assume are reliable, sensible purchases, but in reality are very likely to hit you in the wallet. Are there any other terrible engines you can think of that should be in this list? If so, please do drop them in the comments section below. If you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button. I'm gunning to try and get to 100,000 subscribers this year. I've got my place on the wall here for my little YouTube plaque, so it would really help me out if you do hit subscribe. Also, hit the like button, and I'll see you for the next one.